Be wary, child, of Plagueland's plain. Be mindful, child, of the infected grain. For if throat is parched, and of infected water sip, forever your soul will be in cursed Scourge grip. So heed this warning, child, and if far from mother stray, let light from home hearth guide you back your way. Hey everybody, I'm Ryan. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most horrific things in World of Warcraft lore, the Scourge. If there's anything in this video that you want to learn more about, and I've done videos on, you'll find links to those in the description. Please check those out. Ner'zhul was captured while going through a portal attempting to escape Draenor by Kil'jaeden. Ner'zhul had failed to give the Orcs fully to the Burning Legion, and he was punished by Kil'jaeden by destroying his body and bonding his soul with a suit of armor, then encasing him in a block of ice and sending him to Azeroth. His job would be to command the undead armies of the Scourge, to soften Azeroth for the Burning Legion invasion. Instead, the Lich King would use these newfound powers to attempt to defy the Burning Legion even further. The plague of Undeath spread in Lordaeron, and it couldn't be stopped even if it was detected in the early stages. Because diseases and plagues weren't necessarily rare, King Terenas Menethil II wanted more information before he committed resources. The liberated Horde was on the loose, and unless the plague was a more immediate threat, he wanted to focus on that issue instead. The plague claimed his first victims in Lordaeron, and reports started coming in of bodies disappearing overnight, and the dead rising from graves as mindless corpses. This was the final symptom of the plague, and they were enslaved to the Lich King's will. An army slowly formed as a result of Quel'Thalas' efforts, composed of the undead and the cult of the damned. He named his new army the Scourge. As time went on, the Scourge became the name for everybody who followed the Lich King, one of the eventual 4 major undead factions across Azeroth, alongside the Forsaken, Knights of the Ebon Blade, and the Risen. The Kirin Tor sent Jaina Proudmoore to investigate the plague, and King Tyrannus sent envoys led by his son, Arthas Menethil, to aid her. When Arthas saw the destruction this plague brought, he vowed to bring an end to this for his people. They discovered that the plague had been transmitted within grain shipments from Andorhal, and that the plague killed its victims first with an illness, then raised the bodies into undeath. They also discovered that a human, Quel'Thalas, was behind this, and that upset Arthas even further. Over time, the Lich King would use these strong feelings to slowly corrupt Arthas to be his vessel and his champion. In the Plaguelands exists Scholomance, which houses a series of crypts, and was once owned by the Barav family. The family was convinced by Quel'Thalas to donate his crypts to the Scourge. The Cult of the Damned responded by killing the Baravs and using it as a school for necromancy, headmastered by Darkmaster Gandling. The Lich King had Quel'Thalas sacrifice himself to Arthas, knowing he would be raised as an undead, so that he could lure Arthas to Stratholme by telling him that the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis was there, spreading the plague. When Arthas arrived in Stratholme, he was desperate to save his people, and his hatred festered. Uther, the paladin who trained Arthas, joined them en route, but he could not talk sense into Arthas. They discovered that the grain was already distributed and consumed by the citizens of Andorhal. They would soon die and be raised as undead. Arthas made the decision to cull Stratholme, to kill the citizens before they turned into undead. That's what he would have wanted. Uther, the paladins with him, Jaina, and many of the soldiers were disgusted with the thought of killing innocents and refused to take part. Arthas declared the paladins' refusal treason, and Arthas, and those loyal to Arthas, let the killing commence. Fire and screams cut through the air. There, Arthas confronted Mal'Ganis, who challenged him to come to Northrend and have a true battle, and fled. Arthas believed that if he could kill Mal'Ganis, he could defeat the Scourge and save Lordaeron. He ventured to Northrend with what was left of those who were loyal to him. The Lich King succeeded in luring him there. Uther went to King Tyrannus to inform him about what his son had done, and Jaina went back to Dalaran to report to Antonidas about the plague. There's evidence that Baron Rivendare was purposefully spreading the plague grain to his people and turning them undead for the Lich King. and he rules over more than just Stratholme. Sir Thomas, a paladin, was the one sending people to their final rest within his territory that Arthas missed in the culling of Stratholme. It seems that the Lich King's will over the undead is based on that being's willpower versus the Lich King's necromantic powers. There are a lot of cases of the undead simply resisting, albeit difficultly, though most are unable to resist at all. One great example is Trag Highmountain, who is a Death Knight that was able to resist the call of the Lich King for a long time, along with many of the Forsaken. The next step for the Lich King and the Scourge was to lure Arthas to Frostmourne, and there were dwarves in Northrend, led by Muradin Bronzebeard, looking for artifacts. The Dreadlords and the Scourge planted clues to the location of Frostmourne to the dwarves. He then had the Scourge attack the dwarves and herd him towards Arthas so they would meet up and lead Arthas to Frostmourne, who thought it would help him in his fight against Mal'Ganis. While searching, a missive was sent by Lordaeron, saying that Arthas and his soldiers were to return immediately. Knowing that disobeying the king would amount to treason, Arthas burned his own ships, so the soldiers could not return, and they would continue to help him fight Mal'Ganis. The Scourge attacked them, and their only choice was to find Frostmourne to defeat the Scourge. Muradin urged Arthas to leave Frostmourne because he could tell it was evil, but Arthas took Frostmourne anyway. Jagged ice splintered from its prison, and one of them struck Muradin, taking him down. Arthas found that after accepting Frostmourne, the light had left him, so he turned his back on the light and fully embraced Frostmourne, and it took his soul. From the blade, the Lich King could now speak to Arthas and manipulate his actions. Arthas saved his soldiers from the Scourge with the blade, and then marched on Mal'Ganis to the location told to him by the blade. The Lich King did not command Arthas to not kill Mal'Ganis, so he did. The Dreadlord was one of the Lich King's handlers, sent by the Legion, and with him dead, it meant the Lich King was one step closer to being free. As Arthas spent more time in Northrend, knowledge began creeping into his mind, including the ability to wield necromantic magics. When Arthas returned to camp, his skin was pale, and his hair was white. Arthas slaughtered his own soldiers. He raised some as normal Scourge undead, and some as Death Knights, like himself, including Thessarion, who Arthas eventually made kill his wife to prove his loyalty, and Falric, a soldier whose loyalty to Arthas was rewarded by him being turned into a Death Knight. He then rallied the Scourge to his side and returned to Lordaeron. While Arthas was gone, the Scourge mysteriously pulled out of Eastfold and vanished. Most of Lordaeron believed that Arthas succeeded in defeating the Scourge in Northrend. This was actually done so people would believe that, and Arthas would be welcomed back, and so it would be too late to realize that he had been corrupted. Arthas returned with the huge Scourge army. He ordered them to stay hidden, besides a handful of Death Knights which he had accompany him to the capital, shrouding themselves in cloaks. Arthas was welcomed back as a hero for defeating the Scourge, but when Arthas reached the throne room, he fed Frostmourne, the soul of King Terenas. Arthas and the Death Knights then rampaged through the capital city of Lordaeron, killing the crowds that had welcomed him home. Simultaneously, the Scourge relaunched attacks on the rest of Lordaeron. The Third War had begun. Neighboring alliance kingdoms came to help. Magi from Dalaran, dwarves from Ironforge and Aerie Peak, gnomes from Nomergon and other human kingdoms, and even high elves from Quel'Thalas came to fight. However, the Scourge was not a mindless army. It was controlled by the Lich King, and through him, they had strategy and vast numbers. Necromancers, vast armies of mindless zombies, abominations, Crypt Fiends, gargoyles, frostworms, and more. Over time, Arthas and the Scourge took Lordaeron for themselves, and during this time, Nathanos Marris was killed and raised to serve the Scourge. Strangely enough, Andorhal was one of the few locations in Lordaeron that was still under Alliance control. Uther and the other surviving Paladins gathered at Andorhal and used it as a staging point to attack the Scourge. Now that the Alliance was crippled, the Scourge has done its job, and the Burning Legion could cross the Great Sea and seize the Well of Eternity. This invasion was led by Archimonde the Defiler and Manaroth. In order to transport Archimonde to Azeroth, they would need an immense amount of energy. Arthas suggested using the Book of Medivh, which had great guardian power within. This could be done, but the book was stored in Dalaran, so if they could resurrect Kel'Thuzad, who is a mage of Dalaran, they could use his knowledge to bypass their defenses and take the book. Kil'jaeden was happy with the Lich King's plan, not knowing that this was all a part of his plan to be free of the Burning Legion. It fell on Kel'Thuzad's slayer, Arthas, to recover his remains and resurrect him. He marched to Andorhal, the site of Kel'Thuzad's death. It had become a withered section of the Plague Lands. And like I said before, Andorhal happened to be one of the holdouts of the Alliance. Uther and his paladins had gathered here and launched attacks against the Scourge. Arthas and his army stormed the city and slew the paladins he had once trained alongside. When Uther confronted Arthas, he was besting him and knocking him to the ground, but Arthas was too fast. He recovered and slew Uther with Frostmourne. With Uther's death, Andorhal fell to the Scourge. They recovered Kel'Thuzad's remains and set out for Quel'Thalas to use the Sunwell there as a source of power strong enough to resurrect a mage as powerful as Kel'Thuzad. As Arthas marched, the rest of the Scourge continued ravaging Lordaeron. The Scourge stormed Silverpine Forest until they came face to face with the Greymane Wall, isolating Gilneas from Lordaeron. The undead army laid siege to the wall day and night, and King Greymane knew the wall would fall, so he amassed his army, opened the gates, and attacked the Scourge. It would only be a matter of time before the Scourge overran his forces, so he asked his royal archmage, Arugal, for a solution. Arugal learned of a wolf-like creature called the Worgen, and felt he could call to them from the Emerald Dream. He could not control them, but their might be powerful enough to defeat the Scourge attacking Gilneas. Greymane gave the go-ahead, so Arugal summoned the Worgen into Silverpine Forest. The Worgen attacked the undead and defeated them, but then turned on the citizens of Gilneas. Greymane thought he closed the gates in time, but then reports came of Worgen within the walls. As Arthas and the Scourge marched to Quel'Thalas, they found no resistance in the forest. The High Elves were preparing for the Scourge, led by Ranger General Sylvanas. The Magi and priests gathered in Silvermoon, where they would stand a last line of defense. The Rangers, known as the Farstriders, hid in the forest, waiting for the Scourge. Then, they attacked from all sides. For every step that was taken towards Silvermoon, the Scourge had to pay dearly, and Sylvanas' brilliant tactics infuriated Arthas. But, in the battle, Frostmourne spilled Sylvanas' blood, and Arthas decided to punish the Ranger General for the annoyance she caused in defending Silvermoon, and ripped her spirit from her body, turning her into a banshee, bound to the Lich King's will. Arthas and the Scourge then turned on Silvermoon, shattering its defenses. King Anastarian Sunstrider gathered what remained of his defenses on the Isle of Quel'Thalas, where the Sunwell was, ready to defend it, and Arthas used Frostmourne to make a makeshift bridge of ice all the way to the island. Anastarian dueled Arthas on the island shores and fell to him, and as the Scourge took the island, very few elves survived. Arthas submerged the remains of Kel'Thuzad into the Sunwell and cast a spell to raise him into a lich. The Scourge then set their sights on Dalaran to get the Book of Medivh. This corrupted the Sunwell, whose energies would gradually leak into the surviving elves who lived there thereafter. The land where the undead set foot here would die and become known as the Dead Scar. Later on, the elves would reclaim Silvermoon and Eversong Woods from the Scourge, and the High Elves that survived this attack began to call themselves Blood Elves, in mourning for their fallen empire. The mages of Dalaran prepared for a siege. Some fled across the sea west with Jaina Proudmoore. While marching to Dalaran, Kel'Thuzad let Arthas know of the Lich King's plan to no longer be enslaved to the Burning Legion. While the Scourge army distracted the defenders with a frontal assault, Arthas, Kel'Thuzad, the Dreadlord Tychondrius, and a small force of Scourge infiltrated the city. When they approached the vault containing the Book of Medivh, they found Antonidas waiting, and Arthas slew him, like so many others. Kel'Thuzad retrieved the Book of Medivh and fled Dalaran. He then used the knowledge and power within the book to summon Archimonde into the world, who then used his magic to destroy the spires of Dalaran. Archimonde then transferred the control of the Scourge to the Dreadlords, as he saw no further need for the Lich King. The Legion then went to Kalimdor to claim the Well of Eternity, which they would eventually fail at, facing the united Horde, Alliance, and Night Elves. During this time, Arthas alerted Illidan of the Legion's presence in Felwood, which would eventually lead to the death of one of the Lich King's Dreadlord handlers, Tychondrius, and the destruction of the Skull of Gul'dan, weakening the Legion's hold on the world. Arthas retreated, gathering as many Scourge as he could before returning to the Eastern Kingdoms. When Kil'jaeden reached out to the Lich King to mount a second offensive on Kalimdor, the Lich King refused. He rallied Arthas, Quel'Thas, and the rest of the Scourge in Lordaeron and attacked the remaining Dreadlord handlers, Balnazar, Varimathras, and Deathrock. The demons fled to the Plaguelands and hid themselves. Kil'jaeden then contacted Illidan and asked him to take out the Lich King. In Silverpine, Prince Kael'thas Sunstrider and Grand Marshal Othmar Garithos took large amounts of land back from the Scourge. They, and the Night Elves chasing Illidan, converged on Dalaran. Illidan's plan was to weave a massive spell from Dalaran to destroy the Lich King. While doing so, the Lich King sent all of the surrounding Scourge in a frenzy at Dalaran. The first bombardment hit the Lich King's prison, leaving him exposed. But when the Night Elves reached him, they turned his spellwork into disarray, making this attempt to escape Kil'jaeden's wrath a failure, and he fled to Draenor. But the Lich King was hurt. His essence was bleeding through the crack in the frozen throne, and his hold of the Scourge started weakening, and some of them even found their free will returning to them. Sylvanas Windrunner was one of those undead, and she saw the weakness in the Lich King as an advantage to take advantage on he and Arthas. Sylvanas rallied the free-willed undead with the purpose of one day destroying the Lich King. Varimathras and the other Dreadlords had the same plan, taking over parts of the Scourge with the hopes of one day destroying Arthas and the Lich King, which made a three-wayed undead civil war break out in the Plaguelands. The Lich King commanded all of his servants to return to his side, knowing that Kil'jaeden would strike at him in Northrend soon. Kil'jaeden had reached out to Illidan in Outland, now allied with Kael'thas' forces, because he taught the Blood Elves how to use magic to cure themselves of their addiction for mana, and forced him to return to defeat the Lich King. He and his followers traveled to Northrend. By the time Arthas and the Scourge reached Northrend, Illidan was already there, traveling to the Frozen Throne. Arthas cut through Azjol Nerub, cleaving through the servants of the old gods, and rallying every undead he could find there. The armies met at the foot of Icecrown Citadel, and Arthas and Illidan met in combat. The Lich King flooded some of his remaining power into Arthas, which gave him the upper hand and defeated Illidan. Illidan and his forces retreated to Outland in disgrace. Because the Lich King was bleeding out, he would fade from existence altogether soon. But a way to escape this was to merge with Arthas. This saved him, and would gain him a physical vessel. Arthas shattered the Frozen Throne and put on the helmet of the Lich King. Their spirits merged, and they become one of the strongest entities in the world. The task of commanding the Scourge in Lordaeron fell to Quel'Thas, who still dominated much of the Plaguelands, even though Sylvanas and her free-willed undead controlled the Undercity. The Paladins of the Argent Dawn and the Scarlet Crusade continued fighting against the undead, even after the Silver Hand shattered. On the other side of the world, Jaina justified letting the Horde kill her father, Dalen Proudmoore, because he stood in the way of the Horde and the Alliance standing united against the Scourge. And it was also because of the Scourge that the rest of the Alliance did not respond to this killing by attacking the Horde. Instead, Kul Tiras isolated itself, and their hatred for Jaina and the Alliance grew. The Scourge was also the primary reason for the Horde's alliance with the Forsaken, knowing that they needed every ally they could get if the Lich King were to attack again. When Darian Mograine joined the Argent Dawn, he heard that his father's spirit, Alexandros Mograine, was in the Scourge Citadel of Naxxramas, led by Quel'Thas. Many of the Argent Dawn volunteered to storm the Citadel and free his father, but they found that the leader of the Four Horsemen was none other than Alexandros himself. Darian was able to defeat his father and escape with his weapon, the Ashbringer, with his father's spirit inside. Darian would then go on to find a way to free his father's spirit and rid the blade of corruption. An army of Scourge was mounting an offense on Light's Hope Chapel, attempting to gain access to the heroes of Lordaeron buried there and make the Scourge army more powerful. This was the Siege of the Sanguine. Darian felt that if he could free his father's spirit, he could save them from the Scourge. Tyrion had told him that in order to free his father's spirit, he needed to make the greatest sacrifice. So during the battle, he stabbed himself with the Ashbringer. This selfless act freed his father and roused the spirits under Light's Hope Chapel, and their fury destroyed the Scourge army. However, Darian, some others, and the Ashbringer were recovered by the Scourge. Darian was turned into one of the Lich King's Death Knights. The Lich King had been watching the Alliance and the Horde fight at Ank'Varok, and knew that had weakened both factions. He felt that this was his opportunity to strengthen his holdings in the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor. Suddenly, a floating necropolis appeared over many regions of the world, and unleashed undead Scourge to attack the residents of those regions. The power was concentrated in Naxxramas and Kel'Thuzad, which was placed over the Plague Lands. Bolvar Fordragon recruited Alliance heroes to attack Naxxramas. These champions fought through Scourge forces to eventually confront Kel'Thuzad. This stopped the Scourge invasion, but it would not be the last time they saw Kel'Thuzad or the Scourge. The fall of Lordaeron, the attack of the Scourge, the failure of the Light to protect Prince Arthas, King Terenas, the Paladins, and the rest of the kingdom had pushed the leader of the Church of the Holy Light to his breaking point. The cultists of the Twilight's Hammer learned of this, and they came to whittle away the last of his beliefs. They told him of the Void, a powerful energy that never abandons its servants. The old gods whispered to Archbishop Benedictus, and slowly, Benedictus came to believe the old gods and their powers were the natural state of the universe. Publicly, he remained the head of the church, but privately, he was scheming with the Twilight's Hammer. During the time after the Third War, Arthas and Ner'zhul's spirit both inhabited the same body. Arthas decided that sharing the Lich King's power with Ner'zhul would lead to disorder. Their minds were at war with one another for permanent control of the Lich King's power. And slowly, Arthas tore at Ner'zhul's mind, using his guilt of enslaving the Orcs to the Burning Legion as a foothold. This snapped the bonds of Ner'zhul's sanity, and when it was over, nothing remained of Ner'zhul's mind but a whimper of sorrow in the back of the Lich King's consciousness. Arthas was in control. After a long period of time, not being seen since the Third War, the Scourge began attacking Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor again. The Lich King was probing for weaknesses. Arthas felt that a world ruled by his undead would have no more injustice, wars, or flaws. It would also be more capable of uniting against other threats. He had seen the Burning Legion and Cthulhu almost destroy Azeroth already, and he wanted to be able to protect it if it happened again. Step one of that dream was to destroy the Alliance and Horde and fill the world with undead. So the Lich King's plan was to enslave the strongest creatures of Azeroth to add to the might of the Scourge. But first, he needed to lure these champions to Northrend, so he attacked the Horde and the Alliance. This resolved both factions to take the war to the Lich King. Stormwind itself was even attacked by the Scourge, and Garrosh and Thrall were involved in a mock Garrosh with each other after Thrall refused to attack the humans, saying he would not make the same mistakes as Grom, Garrosh's father. This mock Garrosh was interrupted by the Scourge attacking Orgrimmar. One of these attacks was yet another attack on Lightsoap Chapel, both for the heroes that rest underneath, and to lure Tirion Fordring out so the Lich King could kill him. The Lich King personally commanded the attack, with the Death Knight Darion Mograine as his right hand. They attacked the Scarlet Crusade of New Avalon, killing them and raising the most powerful to add to the Scourge army. When the Scourge attacked Lightsoap Chapel, Tirion emerged and began striking down the undead. But then the Lich King appeared, restrained Tirion, and revealed his old attack was a ploy to draw him out. Darion, enraged that he had been used as a distraction, was able to resist the Lich King's will just enough to give Tirion the corrupted Ashbringer. Tirion cleansed the blade and used it to strike at the Lich King, driving him from the chapel. Tirion then united the Argent Dawn and the Order of the Silver Hand into the Argent Crusade, which had a goal to destroy the Lich King. The Death Knights that had participated in the battle found themselves free from the Lich King's will. So Darion rallied them, no longer a part of the Scourge, into the Knights of the Ebon Blade, also with the primary goal to take revenge on the Lich King. The plan behind the Lich King's other attacks worked. The Alliance and Horde mobilized and sailed to Northrend to defeat him. When the Alliance landed on Howling Fjord, commanded by Bolvar Fordragon, the Valence expedition, they realized that many of the Vrykul were now a part of the Scourge, and attacked. The Alliance fought through them. The Horde expedition, the Warsong Offensive, led by Garrosh Hellscream, landed on Borean Tundra. Dranosh Sarfang was given control of the Horde's vanguard, and they fought through the Scourge, even allying with the local Tonka. The Alliance and the Horde both individually worked their way inland, and it wasn't until they reached the Dragonblight that the Scourge launched their first counterattack. Naxxramas appeared over their heads, led by the again resurrected Quel'Thuzad. The Scourge attacked the Alliance and the Horde from all sides, including with spies from within. Champions of the Horde and the Alliance stormed Naxxramas once again, and yet again defeated the horrors of the fortress and killed Quel'Thuzad. After being sidetracked by the insanity of the dragon aspect Malygos and killing him, the Horde and the Alliance continued marching on the Frozen Throne. Begrudgingly, they realized they needed to work together. The two sides eventually met at the Wrathgate with the intention of securing it and then striking at Icecrown Citadel. The Scourge army that stood at the Wrathgate was the largest ever formed, and the Horde and the Alliance stood side by side to take them down. When the Horde and the Alliance seemed to be about to achieve victory, the Lich King himself emerged and joined the fighting. The Horde and the Alliance was winning until plague canisters containing lethal green fog began raining down on all three armies. The Lich King retreated. Everyone in the battlefield was killed, including Bolvar Fordragon and almost 5,000 Alliance soldiers, and Dranosh Sarfang, and over 4,000 Horde warriors. The plague would have spread further if the Red Dragonflight and Alexstrasza had not purified the battlefield with enchanted fire. When the fire died down, Bolvar and Dranosh's bodies were missing, and the Horde and the Alliance knew the only faction that could create such a weapon: the Forsaken. There had been a coup at the Undercity, led by Dreadlord Vermothras against Sylvanas. Together with Grand Apothecary Putris, they created a new plague of undeath that could even kill the Scourge, though originally ordered by Lady Sylvanas in an attempt to take out the Lich King at any cost. In the battle for the Undercity, the Alliance and the Horde invaded the Undercity and overthrew the crew in separate offenses. The war against the Lich King and the Scourge was proceeding well. All that was left was the storming of Icecrown Citadel, and the Scourge forces were amassing there. Tirion Fordring convinced both the Horde and the Alliance that a full-scale assault was exactly what the Lich King wanted, so he could raise those who fell to fight for him. Tirion came to the conclusion that the only way to attack Icecrown was a small surgical strike force to fight its way through to the Lich King. The Argent Tournament was born in an attempt to select champions for the surgical strike. Tirion selected champions among the Alliance and the Horde, and they, Tirion, the Paladins, Darien, and the Death Knights all marched under a new banner: the Ashen Verdict. The assault on Icecrown Citadel began with Alliance and Horde gunships attacking the stronghold from the skies. The strike force then cut into the Halls of Reflection, where the Lich King himself confronted the invaders, forcing them to retreat. They formed a staging ground inside Icecrown Citadel's main entrance and attacked again. They fought their way through the Lich King's most dangerous minions, and had also transformed Dranosh Sarfang into a Death Knight, and the strike group vanquished them all. When they finally reached the Frozen Throne, they found the body of Bolvar Fordragon disfigured and suspended by the chains above the throne. The Paladin was not as easy to corrupt as Dranosh, and had been able to resist the Lich King's horrific torture to be turned into the Scourge. The Lich King's plan had come to fruition. Azeroth's most powerful heroes stood before him, and he wanted to be able to raise them as weapons. The fate of the world was decided in this battle. Several heroes' souls were ripped from their bodies in the battle. Tirion was frozen in a block of ice, and everyone else was slaughtered. The Lich King began to raise these champions into undeath. But Tirion broke free from the ice, and in one swing destroyed Frostmourne with the Ashbringer. The souls trapped within Frostmourne spilled out and swarmed the Lich King. Arthas Menethil's father, Terenas Menethil II, raised the slain champions, and they joined in fighting the Lich King. The Lich King fell, and as Arthas died, the corruption of the Frozen Throne also faded away. Terenas' spirit warned Tirion that without a powerful person controlling the undead, they would continue killing. Tirion intended to take the burden for himself, but he was stopped by Bolvar. Bolvar knew he could not return to his former life with his body broken and his mind scarred. He would wear the Lich King's helm and keep the Scourge in check for the rest of time. Bolvar was the new Lich King. As the armies withdrew from Northrend, they barely saw any Scourge at all, so most believed the Lich King was no more, and that Bolvar was dead. Bolvar struggled to quell the undead's aggression, and as soon as he donned the helm, the Holy Light abandoned him, and now his necromantic power warred with his sense of justice. Because of this, from time to time, pockets of undead would break free from his control, specifically in the Plague Lands. When Sylvanas took control of the Valkyr from the Lich King, it taught Bolvar an important lesson. He not only needed to stop the Scourge from harming the living, but also to stop others from using the Scourge to evil ends. The effect of the Scourge would be felt for ages to come, which one of the primary reason Garrosh cites his hatred for humans is the corruption of Arthas and the destruction of the Scourge. Sylvanas, as a part of her grand plan, traveled to Northrend to confront Bolvar, the Lich King. She easily dispatches the Scourge forces that attempts to stop her, binds Bolvar in chains, and takes the helm, claiming Bolvar was unfit to wear it. She pulls the crown apart, releasing the Lich King's grip on the Scourge and causing the sky to shatter, revealing a portal to the Shadowlands. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative and I hope it was fun. Now, if you enjoyed it, please be sure to like, please be sure to subscribe, but most importantly, check out the other places that I post stuff, my TikTok, my Twitch, my Twitter, and join the community on Discord. All those links are in the description, but especially check out the Twitch. My wife and I stream there pretty much every day, and we have a lot of fun, and we would love if you joined our community. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.